Hello there. We've got a very special episode of Rayology for you. This week we'll be talking about nuclear terrorism. We'll begin our discussion with the most important part of a nuclear weapon, the fissile material. Natural uranium is found almost everywhere on Earth, including this soil. About 99.3% of it is uranium-238, and 0.7% of it is uranium-235. The numbers at the end tell you the combined number of neutrons and protons contained within the nucleus. For the purposes of nuclear power and nuclear weapons, it's the U-235 that you're most interested in. That's because when U-235 is hit with a neutron, it readily undergoes fission, where the atom is split and lots of energy is released. On the other hand, when U-238 absorbs a neutron, it doesn't fission, but is instead converted to plutonium-239. In fact, that's how you create plutonium. You smash U-238 with the neutron in a reactor, and a few days later it'll eventually decay into plutonium.
Fortunately, separating out the plutonium from the nuclear waste is extremely difficult and far outside the capabilities of any terrorist cell. However, once the plutonium is separated, it poses a grave proliferation threat, since it's a readily fissionable or fissile material.
Experts agree that a sophisticated terrorist cell could construct a crude nuclear weapon if they managed to get their hands on enough fissile material. This crude nuclear weapon would utilize the same design as one of the first-generation bombs which were dropped on Japan during World War II. To truly understand the threat that these materials possess, you must first understand what makes these crude nuclear weapons work.
And to understand how nuclear weapons work, you must first understand the concept of criticality.
A critical system is one where every atom that fissions releases one neutron that goes on to cause one more fission. This creates a sustainable chain reaction and is the safe realm where nuclear power plants operate. But for a weapon, you want a supercritical system. This is where every atom that fissions releases multiple neutrons that go on to cause even more fissions, creating a runaway chain reaction. Now, as I mentioned earlier, natural uranium is less than 1% U-235, so you want to separate out some of the U-238 in order to have a higher percentage of the good stuff. This process is called enrichment, and the percent that you enrich to is the percent of U-235 contained in your uranium. For example, power plants use fuel that's enriched to 3 to 5%, meaning 3 to 5% of the uranium is U-235. Anything below 20% is called low-enriched uranium and is not considered dangerous because it's so hard to weaponize. Above 20% is called highly enriched uranium. Since it has such a high percentage of U-235, it's really easy to make it go supercritical and use it in a weapon. Luckily, enrichment is an extremely complicated and super expensive procedure. Little Boy was the first bomb to be dropped on Japan during World War II, and used 64 kilograms of 80% enriched uranium. With a 16 kiloton yield, a remarkably simple gun-type design led to a catastrophic event. They started with two pieces of subcritical uranium, a target with a hollow cylinder and a small projectile. When it was time for detonation, the projectile was shot into the target. The combining of these two subcritical pieces formed a supercritical mass of uranium that was able to destroy Hiroshima in less than a second. Batman, the bomb that was dropped on Nagasaki, used plutonium instead of uranium. Now, based on the nuclear properties of plutonium, using a gun-type design has a high probability of going critical too early and being a dud. So instead, they had a sphere of 6.2 kilograms of plutonium surrounded by 64 explosives. When it came time for detonation, the explosives were set off all at once. This resulted in a powerful spherical shockwave that reduced the size of the sphere, causing it to go supercritical with a 21 kiloton yield that destroyed Nagasaki.
While it's considerably more difficult to produce an implosion-type plutonium weapon, it's still within the capabilities of a really sophisticated terrorist cell.
However, a gun-type weapon would be the most likely route due to the incredibly simple design. The hardest part would not be constructing the nuclear weapon itself, but acquiring enough highly enriched uranium.
So the real question is, how much would they need, and how much is out there?
It's important we make a clear distinction here before moving on. We're talking about nuclear terrorists, not a United States weapons manufacturer. The goals of the latter would be to make a reproducible weapon giving a reliably high yield every time. What the US and even North Korea would consider a dud, 1.5 to 2 kilotons, would be more than enough to kill thousands of innocent lives, cause hundreds of millions of damage, and thus satisfy the needs of terrorists. If given access to 93% enriched uranium, experts agree that just 20 to 25 kilograms would be needed, an amount easily concealed within a backpack. For plutonium, it's even less, around 5 to 6 kilograms. Since so little material is required, you'd think we wouldn't just have tons of this stuff lying around, right? Wrong. There are nearly 1,400 metric tons of highly enriched uranium and nearly 250 tons of weapons-grade plutonium stockpiled in various places all around the world, with most of it located in the United States and Russia. Scary thing is, these stockpiles aren't always as secure as we'd like to think they are, and there have been multiple instances of disturbing security breaches all around the world. According to the IAEA, there have been 18 counts of highly enriched uranium or plutonium either being lost or stolen from 1993 to 2007. And these are just the cases where the material was either reported or recovered. Given the sheer amount of stockpiled material and unavoidable uncertainties in material accountancy, there could be even more cases. With so much material in this world, the best way to prevent terrorists from getting their hands on it is to simply get rid of it.
For the highly enriched uranium, the solution is easy. Through a process called downblending, you basically unenrich the uranium. Uranium-238 is added to the HEU until the enrichment level is brought down to about 3 to 5%, after which it can be sold as nuclear fuel and used in power plants. In fact, the United States and Russia have already begun doing this in an effort to reduce the threat of nuclear terrorism. Already, 475 tons of HEU have been downblended.
It's a little trickier with plutonium. You could try something similar to downblending and using it for fuel, but that would lead to a market, causing more plutonium to be produced. A better option is called canned in a canister. You first take your fuel and convert it into a ceramic, which is hard to be used in a weapon. You then place it in a large canister. Afterwards, you fill this canister with highly radioactive waste and can turn it into a glass through a process called vitrification. Now the whole configuration is in a super stable state and can be buried underground or even stored on site. The radiation levels act as a deterrent to would-be thieves, and the plutonium would be virtually impossible to turn into a weapon.
One last side note before we go. This whole time we've been talking about terrorists making a nuclear bomb, not a dirty bomb where you use conventional explosives to disperse radioactive materials. A well-made dirty bomb might disperse enough radiation to kill a handful of people, whereas a nuclear bomb could kill thousands if not millions of people. Comparing the two isn't like apples to oranges, it's more like blueberries to watermelons, so the two shouldn't even be talked about in the same context. Well, that'll do it for this week's Rayology. Thanks for watching.